It was a flashpoint of violence during the recent unrest, and its health department allegedly a scene of PPE corruption. So just how will the current climate in Gauteng influence voting in the province today? Well, reporter Silindelo Masikane is standing by for us in Johannesburg as residents head to the polls. And in Cape Town, Lindsay Dentlinger is standing by with the latest from the results centre in Cape Town. Well, let's start with Slee. Slee, good morning to you. You've had an early start. Communities were recently brought to a standstill in the attempted insurrection. What's the atmosphere like there today?
Well, definitely a much more different atmosphere in terms of what we're seeing here in and around areas in Gauteng. It does seem as though that eligible voters have certainly come out in their numbers. The voting stations went live at 7 a.m. this morning. We find ourselves at the Northern Farm, just close to Diepsloot, in fact, and we're at the Paradise Bend Primary School that has been turned into a voting station, and it just seems that the queues are moving quite quickly. Much more different picture than what we saw this morning in Dentlinger, where there's a lot of traffic, people even bringing camp chairs to wait in line. But it does seem as though that voters today are seemingly very keen to make their mark, to make a difference in their municipalities, to have their voices heard and to possibly see a change coming to their communities when it comes to service delivery. So what we are seeing is that Gauteng, in particular the municipality of Johannesburg, will be the most highly contested municipality. There's about 56 political parties on the ballot paper who are wanting to take control of the country's economic hub. And what we know, of course, is that there are several hotspots around Gauteng that have also been identified in terms of possible issues around protests. That's in particular is in Tshwane, eNCA, areas such as Mamelodi, Mabopane, as well as Atteridgeville have been identified. But so far from the voting stations we've been to from early this morning, the processes seems to be unfolding quite nicely, and we had an opportunity, of course, to speak to the IEC chairman who cast his vote in Dentlinger, Glenn Mashinini, who said they would be getting a report in terms of which voting stations had issues, but they're hoping for a very smooth day.
See, it's a great feeling to see those visuals that you've put up of so many people going to the polls so early to exercise their right to vote. Let's not forget that it's still very much a privilege that many people hold dear. The city of Johannesburg has had 3 mayors at its helm in a short period of time. What chances does the DA mayoral candidate actually have?
Well, you know, it's going to be quite interesting. I think the race in Johannesburg is certainly one that's going to be watched with very keen eyes. We have been seeing that political parties, in particular the ruling party, really wanting to ensure that they can get majority of the votes. But what we've been seeing for a couple of years now, especially since 2016, is the rise of coalition governments. And it will be quite interesting to see whether there'll be any new players that will make a mark, especially here in Johannesburg. One is looking at, of course, at a political party like Action SA, where Herman Mashaba was the former mayor of Johannesburg under a different political party, and how well he'll do in these elections. But certainly, once the results start trickling in, I think we all will be looking at all the major metros across the country as to how the political parties will do.
Slee, you've been on the ground for the past 2 weeks for us, garnering what kind of complaints residents have in Johannesburg and Soweto especially. What are the big bugbears that are going to be bringing people to the polls?
Certainly, service delivery at a very basic level in Gauteng has been a major issue in all of the wards and metros. And, you know, when you speak to residents on the ground, they're just so fed up with not having electricity every now and then, not having water, potholes, those bread and butter issues that affect communities and the way in which they live, or the quality of life alive. I mean, just recently we were plunged into darkness as a country, into stage 4 load shedding, and people were on social media were saying that this should be a reminder to those going to vote to think about their vote, to think about the difference that they want to see, and whether political parties or independent candidates should be the ones that are leading their communities.
Slee, just give us a reminder of some of the rules at those polling stations. What are the do's and don'ts? And I'm talking really about wearing political regalia and the sort of protocols that need to be obeyed at polling stations.
Certainly, we know we've been following many of the political parties. I'm going to ask Joe Madlala to walk out with me from the this particular voting station, so you can see that campaigning is certainly not allowed today, but the political parties can have a presence. You can see them situated outside of the polling station, still here, still trying to make a mark, maybe try and influence voters, remind them that they are contesting. However, in terms of campaigning, in terms of being actively campaigning, certainly that isn't allowed today. But political parties, as well as their independent candidates, can have a presence outside of the voting stations, and of course they've got their party agents inside as well, who are reporting for them in terms of the numbers and ensuring that all the numbers collate at the end of the day.
Slee, you've got until 9 o'clock this evening to cast your mark on those ballot papers. But as Gareth, my colleague Anchor, said earlier, bring sunblock and some water, and if you are infirm, a camping chair, because it looks like those queues are only going to increase, certainly in the metros.
Well, Annika, I actually am one of those that made their mark over this weekend. I applied to have a special vote because I knew that I'd be working today. So I have actually made my mark, and I am actually imploring on all South Africans to take up this opportunity and have their voices heard.
All right, we're going to go to the Eastern Cape. We have a political leader there casting his vote, and let's take us to the Eastern Cape.
It's a prosperous. Okay, let me first. Some of the TVs. What is done today, and we'll never get it. Our children will no longer go to Cape Town, go to Johannesburg, go to Durban. All those people will come to us because there will be opportunity, that chance.
What are you saying about this? For us, Lindsay, are you still standing by for us? Lindsay Dentlinger.
Annika, very quiet here at the Provincial Results Centre this morning. We obviously expect things to pick up here in the course of the day. Earlier, the group of religious representatives and civil society representatives who form part of the observer team were here meeting and getting their marching orders before they distribute themselves around the city to keep an eye on elections. But Annika, unlike where you are in Johannesburg, it's a wet morning here in Cape Town, so to be expected possibly that Slaapstad gets off to a little bit of a slower start today because the weather not great, and as you know, in our informal settlements here in the city, often not the best of conditions to stand in a long queue in the wet. Many roads are wet, puddles, and they are having to deal with all other kinds of issues like a lot of sewage and stuff running in the streets. So probably to be expected that they get off to a bit of a slower start here in Cape Town today, but we do know that several of the city's mayoral candidates, you know, the battle here is fierce. They are set to vote within the next hour or so across the city in those respective areas where they live. So my colleagues will be taking you there shortly as we follow some of them around the city casting their ballot today.
Lindsay, just unpack for our national viewers, please, why the battle for those mayoral seats and those ward councillors is so fierce in the Western Cape.
Well, Annika, many feel that, it's a fait accompli. This is DA country and it will probably stay that way. But Annika, probably not since 2006. Do we expect the battle to be so fierce here in terms of the DA possibly maintaining that over 60% majority they attained here in 2006? There are over 90 political parties contesting in elections across the Western Cape, more than 30 of them here in the city of Cape Town alone. Many smaller parties looking to change, and yesterday I spent some time with some of the independent candidates, more than 20 of them here in the city alone, more than 80 in the province, hoping to convince people maybe not to back a political party, but rather to back an independent candidate who will be more accountable to communities across the city. And then we also have the fact of Patricia de Lille's Good Party. You know, she is the only person to have been elected twice as the mayoral candidate here in Cape Town. Of course, she didn't finish that second term after her acrimonious departure from the DA, but she will be casting her vote here today, and she's putting up Brett Heron, who is also a seasoned councillor in the city. So she is a new party to her party is a new one to watch here in the Western Cape. Also the Patriotic Alliance looking to make inroads, and then of course the Freedom Front Plus putting up Leonard Max, the former provincial police commissioner, also a former DA member, as its mayoral candidate, and it's really hoping to steal some of the votes from some disillusioned supporters of the DA. So really, Annika, that's just a snapshot of why the battle is so fierce here. And then of course we cannot not mention the ANC. I mean, this is a sore point for them, this province, this city, the only one province they don't govern, and lost control of the city more than 15 years ago. So they are also desperate not to extend the DA's lead in this province by another 5 years. But of course they didn't fare too well here in 2006, less than 30% of the vote. So they, of course, don't tell us who their mayoral candidate is. So difficult to judge who they will put up should they be successful. But, of course, they are campaigning or have been campaigning really hard in those informal settlements in Cape Town, where so often pundits will point out that this is really the tale of two cities, and that they don't enjoy the kind of services that more affluent areas in the city enjoy under DA administration in Cape Town.
Okay, Lindsay Dentlinger there at the Results Centre in the Western Cape, and please alert us to any problems that the IEC might be having due to the inclement weather.